have two wonderful guests here with us today. And before we introduce them, I will quickly introduce myself. So my name is Declan Kenny. I run what's called the Business Development Group here in Oracle. But I'm also the Oracle Digital Hub Leader for Dublin, and that's why we're here in Dublin today. And we're having a discussion around AI and more broadly around the ethics of AI and around the topic of AI. But before we get into it, maybe Kevin, could you introduce yourself first? And we go from there.
Yes, my name is Kevin Koidl. I'm a research fellow in the Adapt Centre in Trinity College. And my specific research area is personalization, which is AI basically, or emotional AI as they call it now, which is trying to come up with ways that we can emphasize and relate to machines, algorithms, chatbots and so forth.
Okay. And Andreea, thank you Kevin for that. Can you give a quick introduction to yourself please?
Sure, my name is Andreea Wade. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Opening.io. We built a recommender engine that understands people and jobs, and we match them together. We're a data science company building layers of intelligence around talent.
Okay, great. So thank you very much for joining us today. Now, here's the thing. AI, it's kind of popping up everywhere, right? Whether it be in healthcare, whether it be in transport or autonomous cars, it's even coming up in the criminal justice system. You know, it's coming up everywhere. But one question I have is, you know, yes, it's pervasive and, you know, it's technology and often technology leads first and maybe regulation follows. But Kevin, do you foresee any ethical issues around AI?
Yes, there's numerous ethical issues on all of those areas you just mentioned, and there's a few more as well, which is obviously in the whole military area, which is a big concern. But just to use one example in terms of ethics, it's the typical the bridge example, or there's different names of it, and it goes back to an old philosophical problem, the horse cart problem it's also called, which is if you take a self-driving car, which is completely autonomous, and let's say it has an individual sitting in the car, and it's driving towards a bridge, and on the bridge there's somebody stumbling onto the road, and now the autonomous vehicle has to make a decision, the algorithm has to make a decision of either hitting that person or driving off the bridge and potentially killing the person in the car. So that's a pretty intense and complicated ethical question that we have to face, and that similar logic applies to many areas within AI, and it's still not clear from any point of view how we will actually deal also legally with machines making decisions over life and death, and that will happen, and most likely will happen more in the military sector, where we see drones being used to hit certain targets, and it's still remote controlled, quasi-remote controlled, but it's already heavily supported by algorithms in terms of identifying patterns. So this is very complicated stuff.
Yeah, but let's take the hot topic of autonomous driving, right? Okay, so we're trusting the machines. So the car's coming over the bridge, it makes a decision and says, well, you know what, the trade-off here is one guy on the bridge or 3 passengers. I'll take the 3 passengers because, you know, the algorithm says that's the best thing to do. So are we not better off to trust a machine rather than maybe trusting a human who panics and everybody may get killed?
Yeah, well, I think you pointed to the valid kind of part of the entire, or the difficult part of this entire debate is the algorithm makes the decision, and the question is based on what? Like an algorithm, a human still has a much stronger emotional relationship to empathy in that sense, like feeling that situation, and then obviously there's some kind of instinct that kicks in, which could be driving off the bridge or whatever.
Sure.
And also some kind of action which might be even based on experiences or past experiences. For a machine, it's actually irrelevant if they hit. The machine doesn't make a difference between hitting the person or driving off the bridge, because it's been trained on certain data, and that's, I always find, a very important part, which is forgotten in this entire AI debate. It's not about the algorithms. It's actually about the data. Who fed the data? What is this data? Is the data biased? Is the data driven by some kind of interest of an insurance company? Who trained this thing that now has to make a decision to drive off the bridge or hit an individual?
Okay.
And that's not so much an ethical question, that's more an economic question, because most companies that are using this information and driving it into the algorithms, they're protecting it. It's proprietary.
Okay.
And that's a really hard other question.
Absolutely, that's a tough decision, right? But that leads us to Andreea, who is running her company and is basing it, a lot of it, on AI and machine learning and so forth. And as Kevin touched on, maybe what bias is feeding the machine. So it's almost like this kind of idea of bias in, bias out. And you might go, well, are we better off just leave the humans to it, because the machines are getting fed maybe by a biased system anyway. So how do you mitigate against that, or do you just allow the machine to run and say la vie?
So that's a really good question, and we get asked that quite a lot. I think, this whole area of AI, whatever it means, is this mysterious area that people think that there is this entity, and wherever you apply it, narrow AI within CV search or whatever, you just unleash it and it does its thing.
Yep.
And we're not quite there. And I'm not saying about us as a company, but the world and what is commercially deployed is not quite there. That is a thing called reinforcement. The algorithms don't yet just learn by themselves in this environment where nobody goes in and checks in. Things are a little bit more structured than that. You have your training data, you know what that training data is, you feed it, and it's a game of calibrating and recalibrating, but it is not yet a game of allow this algorithm to just watch what Andreea does for the next 6 months, what CVs she picks, and who she places through the funnel. It doesn't work like that quite yet. Okay. However, the problem here is even understanding what bias is. What we do today, we say, here's a bunch of CVs and here's a bunch of jobs, and we try to understand you. How relevant are you to be placed in this job? And we look at all sorts of things. We look at how long you worked in a place for and how long ago. We look at education and all these kind of things. And we say we don't look at names. So we don't care if you're a he or a she or whatever you are. We don't look at where you come from, and we say this thing is bias free. However, we have to go a little bit deeper, because if we we don't look at names or whatever, but we hire people from a certain area or from a certain school, there is bias that is particular to that academic institution or to that company where they come from. So you have to kind of go deeper and deeper and kind of go, what kind of people go to that school? Well, it might be 90% male. I don't know. I'm just making this up. So it definitely is a very, very interesting topic, and it does start with data.
But it's interesting, the data and how the machine is learning against the data, because we all know, right, there are particular industries that are, let's just say, haven't got a wonderful gender balance. Okay, so if we have machine out learning on previous or past employment history of a particular industry, is the machine that's not going to replicate that apparent bias in the system and just produce it back out in some algorithm, and the problem actually perpetuates itself?
Absolutely, and that is the responsibility of companies that are doing anything within machine learning, deep learning or whatever, which is really, what we do is we start with pattern recognition. That's what it is. We look at how many of this and of that matches this thing that I'm looking for. Are you looking at patterns? And it's the responsibility of companies that are developing technologies like this, but also of companies that are buying tech like this, to really look at this, when you're in the process of digital transformation and go, I want to achieve this or that, it is the responsibility both of the AI companies and of the buyers, the company that is doing whatever new thing they're doing, to check themselves.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, let me come back to yourself, Kevin, for a moment, because let's just say there's pros and cons of AI, and let's call it the use case of AI, right? But can you give us a view of some of the positives around AI? Is it in healthcare, or is it around maybe loan applications? Coming from Dublin, we had a major crash where a lot of it was based on cheap money, where loan applications are being handed out every day of the week. And you might ask yourself, well, if we had an algorithm running there with a lot of data, maybe those loans may not have been handed out as easily. So, are there areas that you have seen that AI, we should be to the forefront and we should be using even more of?
Yeah, I think the nice or the good example is actually in healthcare. Like there's very good work in healthcare where pattern recognition leads to a higher rate of identifying cancerous tissue or identifying certain even behavioral patterns that then assist the doctor to kind of alter the patient's behavior. We see that a lot with the Fitbit stuff, where you kind of go, okay, there's a whole rake of people now that are totally into wellness, and they use devices with AI inside, very very narrow AI, but still good AI, that actually identify certain patterns of behavior, showing calorie count, how you eat, and so forth, and with that can then make predictions on how your health is progressing. And you can see that with companies like Apple and specifically IBM very aggressively moving into healthcare and moving into these devices that can then constantly monitor your pulse and correlate it with all these different data points. And as soon as we talk about correlating with different data points, that's then, oh yeah, okay, here we have AI, because it's a lot of data, very different data. And if you take that en masse, if you take that in let's say a probabilistic curve on certain ages, and you can say, okay, this person has been doing certain things for 5 years and it turns out to be really healthy. Okay. So maybe we should recommend a similar behavior to people with a similar profile. So suddenly it's very similar to the business you guys have, which is matching certain profiles in terms of sales or in terms of recruitment. It's technically mostly the same game, but in healthcare I think it's the most positive impact, because you can really see that it works.
Now I can see, the huge benefits you say in healthcare, especially around identification of cancerous tissues earlier. On the flip side of that, you're now putting the machine into probably the most sacred area of all, which is healthcare. And you probably have to ask yourself the question, well, what percentage of failure points do we accept? That if the machine misses 5% and 5% of patients die earlier than they should have, is that okay?
Yeah, I mean it's a similar argument or a similar kind of debate as with the self-driving car, and we saw it with Tesla in a few cases where Tesla crashes once or twice, and it actually was proven that it wasn't the algorithm, it was the driver in those cases, and it's still on an unrealistic high percentage more positive to have this technology in certain cases, including healthcare, and then having a low failure rate. Okay. And you'd still save 1,000x more people on healthcare scanners for let's say detecting cancer cells, and you might miss one or two, but it will be a lot less than without the technology. Okay. And we will always, as humans, and that's good because we want to optimize and perform and be better and better ourselves in humanity. We'll always focus on those outliers, and we try to get rid of them. But in total, it's very, very positive. In healthcare, though, we have to balance it, because here again the human element comes in, which I think in terms of ethics is a lot more concerning, is how humans and economics behave with these technologies on hand. And that's where, for me at least, most of the concern is, because what we can see now is that doctors are forced by insurance companies to use these devices, and suddenly a surgeon gets totally reduced to a mechanic almost, who just uses certain devices in operation situations and can't make a judged decision anymore, because if a doctor goes against the algorithm and says, okay, this thing is actually showing red, but I think this is actually something else, and then follows their own decision, they might be sued because they didn't do what the device said. Okay, so that's not AI. That's where the human comes in, and there's a whole area of examples where we can see this, that companies apply technologies and suddenly whole areas of the economy are left out because they don't fit into a certain profile or they don't have a certain score or whatever it is.
Interesting. Okay, that's a very interesting angle, where you actually almost deplete that skill set of that doctor working for and educating him or herself for many, many years, and the machine takes over. Andreea, let's come back for a second, because the word data has been mentioned a lot, and your company consume lots and lots of data, all right? There is one argument to say, who cares? If it's going to get me the right job, fantastic. I don't really care where my data goes. If you take of the typical user, I mean, I've obviously used Netflix a lot, and it tells me, hey, there's a 98% probability you're going to like this next show. Do you know what? Great. It has all my data, it's storing it, it's making my life easier. So what's under the hood or what's behind the curtain, who cares?
Right.
What do you think of that proposition? Who cares?
Yeah, no, you should care.
Why?
I care.
Why should I care if it's making my life easier and I'm just going about my daily routine in a more efficient way?
Because everything leads to something else. Your profile related to a certain behavior in a certain moment of time, in a certain context, will be added to another piece of information and another piece of information. And what we're doing is we're slowly giving ourselves away to companies that will use that information to do X, Y, and Z. There's companies out there that have patented networks around people, networks of friends. There's companies out there, or a company out there that looks at networks of friends, looks at me, my friends, and decides that this is my credit score, and it gives me a score. And if Kevin goes bankrupt, and he's my friend, and he goes bankrupt, or you become a millionaire, my score changes with that. We should care. There is no, sure, I have heard so many times, I have nothing to hide. It's not about that. It's how is my data, how is my information going to be used, and by whom to do what. And we have seen, just by being on social networks, how certain entities out there have turned around elections or whatnot. So I think we should absolutely care about who uses our data and what for. Okay,
interesting. So it's not the privacy isn't the issue, it's the use of the data is the issue.
Absolutely. We're constantly, we're gathering all this, in an effort to, most commercial endeavors are about in an effort to get us to consume more. Don't leave Netflix because I know what you like. And I'm going to use all that data, and we're going to not only it's not just about that 98% you watched, I don't know, Ozark, and now you're going to watch some other crime thing. We're going to know what other shows to produce for you, because we know that 98% or 50% of our audience likes that. We'll build more for you, and you'll stay on Netflix and you'll pay us more.
So the argument then that I'm hearing is, and Kevin, I'll pose this question to you, that let's not give the AI, let's just say machinery, to the corporate commercial machine, and let's just give it to maybe government organizations that are there for greater societal impacts. Maybe that's the answer.
Yeah, but that's happening as well. I mean, the whole concept of nudging, and we can see it in all areas where...
Nudging, explain that to me.
Nudging it's basically if you go into, let's say, into a government, let's say you're applying for a visa or you're applying for some kind of social security you're filling out a social security application, then you would have certain information that you have to fill out, and nudging would start already with certain information that comes first instead of later down, because you're paying less attention when you're further down. If you do it online, you could be nudged to click a certain box. You could be nudged in society. It happens everywhere, where you're pressed into certain lines where you're walking into again some kind of government office, and you're distributed into different numbers, and you should queue there or go there. And you see it in airports where this happens now too. You're nudged to go to to the machines where you actually work for the airport, for the airline, and you actually, now the newest thing is you print out things and you have to, you feel like you're check-in staff at this point. And use supermarkets as well. You're nudged not to go to an actual person at a till. You're nudged to use those self-checkout boxes.
True.
So that all of that is nudging, and all of that is very, very, I don't want to say dangerous, but it's very, very critical for society in general, because we're moving into a society where we shouldn't be worried about the machines taking over because the machines are becoming more human. It's actually we're becoming more machine, because narrow AI, the way it works, the data relies on certain processes. It has to be structured. And I'm sure you see it in your business as well. Most of your KPIs, I'm sure, have certain, you have to ring so many people a day, and you have to do this, and you have to 5 LinkedIns and so forth. And that's all nudging, and that's all putting people into the box that the machine can then understand. And if you do that, then suddenly you create an ethical dilemma, because people that don't want to conform to that, because they say I'm free or I'm creative or I don't want this stuff, they suddenly get fired, or they suddenly don't get access to a service, or can't get a mobile phone contract.
But that comes back to my question. Are we better off to leave the machinery of AI to, governmental bodies who are regulated and who are there for societal impact, or making a positive societal impact on the greater good, rather than giving it to these greedy corporates who are just going to, take all the money and they don't care what the data is used for?
No, I don't think that it can work like that, because it's not the greedy corporates. The greedy corporates are doing exactly what they should do. They're based on shareholder value in a capitalistic system. It's the value system we have to question. So that brings us to this whole thing of, okay, are machines taking our jobs? I mean, this whole question hinges on, okay, greedy corporates, of course they're greedy corporates because they're based on shareholder value. And if I'm an investor in Oracle, let's say, and I own stock of Oracle, and a lot of governments even own stock of companies, then I want them to maximize their profit, because that's the value system they're working in. And so it's fine. It's completely communicated and fair for companies to do so, and governments to do so too. And it's government's job, obviously, to with monopoly structures and figuring out, okay, we have to split companies because they're too powerful and so forth. But the value system is the real question here. The value system being, should we have a society in which individual companies are so powerful that they can hold so much information that they can actually start structuring how society works? And we see that in social media a lot. And that then brings questions such as, okay, if we don't have this value system, what's the alternative value system? So if the machines take all our jobs, which is great, because I don't want to work in a supermarket, I don't want to work in an airport or in a Starbucks giving out coffees and so forth. I want all those jobs to go away to machines, so that I can sit in Phoenix Park and just read poetry all day. Be an amazing world. Yeah. But then how do I pay rent? How do I pay rent? Okay, that's the question of the value system. Maybe we don't have to pay rent anymore. Maybe there's a more creative way we can do this.
But based on that question of values, though, I think it's a critical point. Right, because, and Andreea, I'll go to you, because you're in the talent business. There's probably nothing more important than people's jobs and the jobs that they have, because we spend pretty much a lot of our time, maybe too much, at work, right? So the decision your AI machinery is making has a massive societal impact at an individual level and country level, right? So what are the values guiding the algorithm in your business?
Look, the ideal, if we look down the road, the ideal scenario is for some of us to sit in Phoenix Park and read poetry. Maybe some of us do maths because we need to go to Mars and beyond and whatever. Yeah, and some
I'd rather
of us
the poetry
will do
option,
whatnot.
Yeah, that's okay.
And universal basic income, all these good things. And if climate change doesn't kill us off, maybe in a couple of 100 years, looking back and looking back at how today we're slaving for a paycheck to pay for things will look like the crazy, one of the darker parts of our history or whatnot. But today we're at the beginning of, having large amounts of data and computational power to start automating some of these things. And the stuff that we are focusing on is, we're in the talent space, and we we help recruiters, employers get to the right person faster.
Okay.
And the other way around as well. This is a data-heavy, a document-heavy industry, and our value prop is spend less time in sifting through CVs, for example. So here's a stat: 3 months out of 12 recruiters just look at CVs. This is what they do 3 months out of 12. Let's get rid of that, or let's get rid of some of that, if not most of that, and let's help you actually talk to people, engage with people, get to that right fit faster. That's
Okay.
what we're doing today. I mean, AI or narrow AI today focuses on automating things that are, automating predictable tasks. I was reading the other day, when it comes to predictable tasks, whatever they are, you can automate about 78% of predictable tasks and about 25% of unpredictable tasks like forestry or whatever, because you don't know what tree is gonna yet or whatever. We don't do that yet. So that's where the world, in some sense, where you see commercial deployment of AI is about automating predictable kind of
True,
things.
but and I get the getting there faster, taking more admin out of the specialized recruiter, using their time to talk to candidates a bit more. But as you said, we're at the beginning, right, of this. Let's call it the fourth industrial revolution. It's being called, right? Fantastic. But because we're at the beginning, the question I have is, what values are we teaching that algorithm because it's at the beginning? Because you are in the talent business, and there may not be much more important business, especially in the commercial space today, of getting it right and hiring the right people. So how are you confident that we're giving this machinery the right set of values to look for those people? Because if I have a scanning a CV, and I have a culture in an organization that values, transparency, integrity, and so forth, how can I pick that up from the machine to say, hey, I've got a great cultural fit here, Andreea, for your company?
You probably won't pick that from a CV,
Okay.
but you might start seeing that if you video interview a candidate and you're asking certain questions, you're hearing the answers, and based on various different types of technologies that look at how you speak, how you talk, what you do when you say different things, what kind of words you use. Do you say I a lot? I did this, I did that, or do you say we?
Okay.
We did this, we did that. What does my face say when I say things? All these kind of things. It's not a CV, but you can start looking into this with the various different types of AIs or technologies that are more and more available today. So, we're at the very beginning of the recruitment funnel, where you have millions of documents or hundreds of thousands, and you go, who should I talk to first?
Okay.
And then you come down that funnel, and then there's the interviewing part, and then you can use all this tech to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go ahead.
That's your question is very, very important, because it's the same in the jurisdiction system, and it happened in America now in 2 cases where data was used out of the 70s to assist judges to make a decision if the person should be prosecuted or not, and the data was heavily biased because the data was fed out of the 70s with data out of the 70s,
Okay.
in which mostly black communities would commit crimes because of economic imbalance, and suddenly they found out that these algorithms are highly racial, like with a very strong racial bias. So if if a guy comes in and he's from a black community, the likelihood is higher that the algorithm says he actually did something.
Which comes back to that healthcare issue, where if you get it wrong, if you get this wrong, you could be in a state where the death penalty's there, and but there's no recourse.
But it's also it's in all these areas, and it's in recruitment as well, because you have these inherent risks, and it happens a lot in social media. You always have this risk that you basically you get more of the same a lot quicker. So if you're recruiting white Irish people most of the time in the 90s, and you use that data, 10 years trained data, you will most likely hire a lot more white Irish men, let's say, whatever the profile is that you would usually hire, and that then creates a lack of diversity, a lack of serendipity, a lack of surprise, a lack of opportunity, and we cannot. It's just not possible at the moment. Create AI which identifies opportunity. It just says, okay, this is not a person that fits to my data. This is not a white mid-30-year Irish person, Caucasian or whatever it's defined. This is some guy. He comes from like, I don't know, some little island in India, but he's amazing. Like, he's super analytical and whatever, but he's like out of the data set. He's a complete outlier. He would be cleaned off by any algorithm right from the beginning, because the algorithm wouldn't know what they're dealing with.
But I think
that's why we call it narrow AI, because it just leaves that you can only apply AI at the moment. That's why it's called narrow AI, to very specific narrow problems.
And Andreea, what's your view on that? Because you were going to come in there. I mean, obviously, he was speaking very much around the talent area and the bias that might be within the system to exclude top talent.
I think one of the positives of what we're capable to do today with technologies is that data will finally allow ourselves to look at ourselves and go, oh, we've been doing this. There was this piece of research done, someone unleashed some algorithms on the world's literature. And they trained these algorithms on, books that humanity wrote, whatever. And then the algorithm was asked various different things. And what it learned that nurses were all women, doctors were all men, and all these kind of things that the algorithm learned from all the knowledge that we have put out there till today. So this is really important, because you can see there's just so many changes, societal changes. We're aware of our language. You see all these social media accounts in their profile, she, hers, all this kind of stuff. We're starting to become more self-aware in a way. We're more aware of the diversity that exists around us, and we're starting to become more aware of some of our own behavior. And I think the positives, what insights into data bring, it's finally and unquestionably is telling us to look at ourselves, and that is.
And looking at it,
I'm not sure if I really agree with that at all. Like, I'm super positive about AI and machine learning and all the algorithms, and they've been there since the 50s, 60s. Turing came up with them, like before that even. And
the
mathematicians.
First chatbot was in the 50s.
Yeah, I mean, mathematicians it's just statistics. AI is just statistics. It's maths. It's nothing else. But now we have computers on steroids. We have GPUs everywhere, CPUs everywhere. They're free. We have data so much that it comes out of our ears, and that's the only difference. It's not the algorithm. So I'm super positive with the algorithm, but I'm super negative with humanity. Like, it's the person is the problem. It's people, individuals, always seek power, always try to reduce fear, always try to make more money, always try to be more greedy, and that's the danger. It's not the algorithm, not the AI, not the machine. It's the way humans use it to exert power on others, to create whatever scenario in society they want. And we saw with Facebook in the States, where suddenly Facebook, which is a neutral tool as such, but just gets weaponized by the interests of a small group, and used against democracy. And that's what I'm worried about. It's not the machine or the AI we should be worried about. It's who has access to this, who's using it, who's paying it, what's the intention of the data, why is this data used, and so forth.
If you look at that, then what we're saying is data does what we torture it to do, right? So as humans, we can't be trusted to present the data in a non-biased way.
No, it's the selection of the data. Like, we can use. Let's use the Facebook example, because everybody's talking about Cambridge Analytica and so forth. It's a big one, and it hits core values, because suddenly you have a weaponized platform which is AI driven that actually harms democracy, which is one of our core values in society. So you get this piece of content that nudges people in a certain area. There's that nice term again, nudges people in a certain area to vote for a certain candidate that this group is interested in to get into power. And all what they then do is they feed this little piece of information, and then thousands of people that get paid $5 an hour click like on that piece of content, and then the greedy algorithm in the which is a neutral algorithm, which just picks up basically viral activity, picks it up and says, oh, there's 1,000 people clicking on like in the last 10 hours, so beams it out to the platform thinking this is a viral content. So all of that has nothing to do with the algorithm or with the data. It has to do with what kind of data was used in that case, and and what kind of behavior was exerted on that data.
Okay.
So that's a pure targeted data behavior, and that is then a data selection question. Like how do we do this? And I don't think we really understand it yet. And in jurisdiction and healthcare and so forth, we either don't have that much data, or we don't really understand how to create that diversity in the data. So your example is lovely. Like that's
we
really nice.
have to believe that people are essentially good.
But it's not the way it's used. It's used specific, selected,
true.
and targeted, and for certain intentions, and that's the way it should be used.
So
it's a tool.
Andreea makes the point, though, that we have to believe that people are essentially good. Now, Kevin, you have a different view, right? Okay.
That's not what I said. No. People are essentially good.
Okay.
But not all of them.
But no. Okay, fair enough. Okay. But if we take the premise that people are essentially good,
yeah,
which, as you said, you agree with. Yeah. I tend to agree with you as well. I think we're all in agreement. We've positive, glass half full. People are generally good. So then, do we just abdicate responsibility to the machine and just say, look, people are generally good. Let the machine run, and we believe the use case of that data will be generally used quite well, and we just take our hands off?
I think what's happening in Europe, the whole dreaded and hated GDPR thing, or whatever. I don't know what you think, but I think all these things, okay, they might be annoying, and you don't know, can I email this person? Can I call them? What am I allowed to do? All this,
Yeah.
But I think initiatives like this, us learning how to look into what is used, it's super important. Because while I said that people are essentially good, eventually my plan is to build a cabin in the woods and lead a disconnected life.
You could go to Phoenix Park and read poetry with Kevin.
Yeah.
He tends to enjoy that.
Yeah.
I think he's there every Saturday morning from 9
And Sunday.
And Sunday. Yeah, but okay, so as you say, even you yourself, who was in this, let's just say data-driven world, your ultimate
I'm the most paranoid. The way, I don't know, doctors, when you're a medical student, and I have loads of friends who, are doctors today, but when they're a medical student, they read the books and then you self-diagnose and you think you have all the diseases in the world and you're like, that's kind of the awareness or paranoia, but it's more awareness, to be honest, that we have working with data. We know what companies can do. We're very interested. I constantly read about what's going on, and there are certain social media platforms that I'm not on, and I would not go anywhere near them, and so on. Because
but ultimately, are we saying here? And I'm going to ask you in a moment to give your future predictions. It's a crystal ball, all right? But are we ultimately saying here that the horse has already bolted out of the stable? We're playing catch up, but we don't know how far this horse has run down the road. No,
I don't think so.
So you think it's not gone too far? It's well controllable, and we can rein this thing back in.
Look, I was in.
Not that easy.
I was in. Where was I? In Hanover, at CeBIT a few years ago,
yes.
And. What's it called? The Human Institute in Oxford? Is that what it's called? There's this professor that looks at the existential threat posed by AI, and there's this institute that this is all they do in Oxford, whatever, and they look at all these things. And I really wanted to go and hear him talk, see what he has to say. And he was talking about the future, and he had his slides and then a panel talk, and he had the picture of the Terminator, versus what reality, not reality, but his example of an AI that takes over was actually very interesting, and it pops into my mind every now and then. He said, look, AI, it's about we built this technology for efficiency, right? So we become more and more efficient to do something. And he was presenting his doomsday scenario, and he talked about a paperclip factory. So this is a factory, and it's making paper clips. And, you know, and it's supervising the people. There's still some people and the resources, and it goes, okay. And it kind of sees that people are taking an hour lunch break, and they go, actually, if they would take a smaller break, we could make this many more paper clips. And then it starts realizing that, you know, we don't have resources in this country, and then it goes after some resource in this other country, and it starts building more factories, and then it starts colonizing planets because it just needs to build more paper clips because that's its mission, efficiency. So, you know, I don't know what the future is, but I hope that first of all, climate change doesn't kill us all, and then we can think about.
Well, if, you know, climate change mightn't, but Kevin's poetry might. We have to be careful of what we wish for. Right?
Recognize poetry.
Yeah, exactly. But taking that crystal ball, right? Let's have a look at it for a moment, and I think it's worth discussing because, you know, you guys are at the forefront of this. You're going and seeing a lot of things that, you know, let's just be honest, the general user that's getting the benefits from this machinery is not seeing, and you're closer to it. So, you know, Kevin, what do you think the future holds for AI?
Yeah, well, there's a couple of angles for this, and it actually goes back to how we perceive our world as a human, because there's a debate, obviously, the Terminator debate, or the idea that we get this singularity. That's always a big term that pops up. Basically, the event after which we have some kind of AI that supersedes or is more intelligent than we are. And now, in narrow AI, that's pretty impossible. Narrow AI is everything what we talk about here, which is a greedy algorithm that optimizes towards a certain value, shows you more content, drives your KPIs up if you don't have lunch for 1 hour, all this kind of stuff. Very, very quantified mathematical stuff that just maximizes and minimizes a number at the back based on certain behavior and data. And then we switch into general AI, which we don't have yet, which is these narrow AI contextual machine learning algorithms that can suddenly switch context. So suddenly this self-driving car can also fly, can also swim, can also talk with you, and it's all the same AI box. It's all basically a deep learning algorithm or some kind of mathematical construct, but it can switch tasks, it can switch context. That's then the general AI. But the stuff that everybody's talking about in terms of future, and that's where I think which is really, really interesting also from a philosophical side is this concept called superintelligence, or this concept where a machine, when we're talking about data, a machine actually starts to suck in data itself and starts to reprogram its own algorithms. And it basically starts to learn very fast.
Okay,
and sucks in a lot of data very fast and makes decisions very fast. And we don't know where that will go and what that is.
So what we're saying is
and it will happen most likely.
Sure. We're saying is in the more narrow set of AI right now, or AI in a narrow sphere, or more specialized sphere, we're saying, you know what, it's quite good. It's quite intelligent, and we can use it if we have the right people behind it, making the right decisions from the outputs.
Well, it's basically, well, narrow AI is very good because it serves the intentions of the people using it. So if we take our example of the airport, narrow AI is very good in controlling crowds towards certain ticket machines, and it saves money. It saves money, that's the purpose of it.
But for the future, we're saying is as it goes general AI and it goes multi-purpose, as I said, it's not a self-driving car, it's swimming, it's flying, it's talking to you, it's cooking your food. Obviously, that's when we think this may really start adding benefit. Is that what we're saying in the future?
We don't know yet. I mean, the adding benefit is the interesting part, because we don't, like, in general, this is way beyond machines, because we don't, as humans, really understand who we are, what we're doing. Like, most of the concepts that humanity is built on, we don't understand. We understand that we're born, we understand we have feelings and we want to connect, we have love, we have hate, and we have these complex things that are in us, and we understand that we're going to die. And most of our stuff that we do during birth and die is maximizing in some way being happy. Even we don't even know exactly what that is. So the question of general AI or super intelligence, anything that goes beyond this is a hammer and it helps me put a nail in the wall.
Sure.
Anything that goes beyond that, that brings up really big ethical questions as well, because suddenly we have this entity that's driven on electricity. So this entity, if we take a basic moral concept by Kant, which is don't do something to someone that you don't want that person to do to you. Yeah? So this machine walks around and it's electric driven. So that machine says, okay, I can actually switch off the oxygen in this room because I don't mind if someone switches off the oxygen on me because I'm not driven on oxygen. So how can we relate these ethical problems that we have or know about? So it becomes super interesting and super wide. So because we don't even know the limits of our own intelligence. We don't even know, like if we start thinking about it, which was your argument, we start to learn about ourselves, and that's maybe the most positive outcome, that based on machines superseding us or building up all this information and becoming more intelligent, we're actually confronted with, okay, what is it actually? What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be a good human? What does it mean to have a good society? And those are big questions.
That's a big one, and that might take.
That's where it takes. That's
true.
Way beyond narrow AI.
No,
what is this society we all want? Is it poetry? Is it what
and
is
for,
it?
for a podcast, we may not get to that full breadth of answering that question, but it's good to open it up. But Andreea, for yourself, that futuristic piece that you see from a commercial standpoint. Right, notwithstanding the Terminator being involved in recruitment at some stage, but what do you see it from a commercial standpoint? The real benefits that you can kind of go, wow, if this worked well, this could have enormous positive impacts from a commercial standpoint.
Look, general AI, super intelligence, all that kind of stuff. I don't know how close or how far we are from that. It's not going to happen next year, I don't think. But there's all sorts of people working on all sorts of things. When the DeepMind guys were asked, what's your value prop? DeepMind, the company that Google bought, they, the whole Go game thing happened. They,
AlphaGo.
And it's one of the companies, I think they have, 600 or 6,000 data scientists. It's just this mad company, they're doing all these things. And they were asked, so what are you doing? And their answer was, well, we want to solve AI and then we want to solve everything else.
Okay.
That was the founder's answer when they were asked, and that's a big thing to say, you want to solve AI, whatever that means, and then solve everything else. And solve everything else towards what? Because it always comes towards, so then what's our purpose? Commercially right now, we still have a lot of work to do. We still have to figure out, things that we see today. We started with a very kind of simple premise. Can you look at my profile and tell me, the things that I could do, where I belong, and can you do it faster, better, we have now problems like some jobs will end by automation, but there are people with certain skills, So we're looking into, can we analyze and pick up on transferable skills, and can we shift, what these people can do next? I have 10 years left, 20 years left, 40 years left, whatever years I have left where I could work. What can I do next? And it's about picking up on these transferable skills, starting to build career paths. We have we call it a model that we're looking at right now that looks, you did this and you did that. We've seen 500 people do the same things and take these 2 steps. Maybe you could do this as well. So
and on that point, and we'll finish on this one, it's almost like the future of work. Okay? If the machine and the AI algorithms start, let's just say, replacing, at the beginning, some of the medial tasks people do on a daily basis, and they say, I'm going to replace X percentage of the working population today. Whose responsibility is it to figure out what those people are going to do? I mean, that's a big question, Kevin. It's going to have high rates of unemployment, and if we don't fill the void with figuring out what these people are going to do, is that not going to cause major societal issues?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's highly debated, and it's a lot of the debate goes around the universal social income. What is it called? Universal basic income,
Yeah.
UBI. This idea that the companies that pick up these efficiencies because they don't have to pay staff, which is a very expensive thing to have, they pick up these efficiencies, and instead of just saying, okay, the shareholders get richer and richer, you tax them higher, and that tax is then used to pay out a certain flat income to everybody in the society. So everybody gets 1,500, let's say, 1,500 a month, and has that as free disposable money. And those experiments have been done in areas and in countries, and I think Denmark and Norway, they're looking into it. Norway specifically because they have a massive surplus. The government has a massive surplus, a big sovereign wealth fund, and it's just, but it always brings up that debate that if you give people this money too early, they might get lazy or they won't work at all, and so forth. So I think it brings us back to the value system question. It depends on how we deal with that as society, and I think we will have to deal with it. And I think the best way to deal with it is actually to view work a little bit different in an ideal world. And I think that's where your business picks up, and maybe a lot of the stuff that happens in the workspace is to actually not call it work anymore, to actually say, okay, can we actually build a society? Can we build some kind of value system where people actually do stuff that they enjoy? That they basically, that you don't have this concept anymore on Friday. Everybody's on Instagram saying, oh yeah, it's Friday, I'm going off to the weekend. How about getting rid of the weekend? How about getting rid of all of that and just saying, okay, I'm actually doing what I love doing, and I do it and I add value to society, and kind of reconnect with that. And obviously somebody has to pick up the trash cans, and somebody has to clean the street, and somebody has to give you a coffee, but maybe all those jobs that nobody really wants can go away.
I was watching Anthony Bourdain last night on Netflix, and he was in Budapest, and they were talking about this beautiful cafe. If you ever in Budapest, go to the New York cafe. It's an amazing place. And they were kind of talking about, I don't know, 50 years ago or 80 years ago, it was this place where all the poets and all the writers and, all these wonderful thinkers would go and would drink coffee and would eat. And very often the establishment would invite them in. If you were a writer and you had no money, but you were putting out beautiful piece, they would actually invite you in, give you food and coffee, and you could just stay there and do your thing all day, because they wanted to have the best, the brightest, or whatever, whoever was doing something meaningful. And there was a comment there saying, we'll never go back to that society, right? We'll never go back to that. Well, maybe we could.
Yeah. But I think this question of work is a really essential question. It's kind of this: what is your purpose in life, and what is a good life? Do you have a job that supports the life and the people you're with, and also this whole element of human connection. It's just really essential to have a job where you're like valued and you're liked, and what you're giving to society is valued. And I think that's often forgotten, and maybe that's a nice optimistic way of seeing AI, is where we actually have this age of abundance, which is often mentioned, where we can come back to those questions of a purposeful living. And I think we're actually, in some parts of society, we have that already. Like you can have a mid-income, and you have choices. Like you can actually apply for jobs and be a writer and do those things now without moving into poverty. So we're at a nice point in society where we can maybe maximize that for more people.
So I have to say, it's been a fascinating conversation. We've touched on everything from the Terminator to Anthony Bourdain to poetry to getting rid of the weekend and maybe living in Denmark. Sounds wonderful, right? Yeah. But I do want to thank you so much for your time. It has also probably opened up many other questions that people maybe hadn't thought about. And it's a broad topic. But thank you so much, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Nice.
Cheers.
Thanks.